Welcome to episode 3 of the Backstage Pass. Youngen, welcome, mate.
Thank you, mate. How you going?
Yeah, good, man. It's people are actually watching us again.
Yeah, surprisingly, mate. Yeah, been a good couple of weeks thus far. We, kicked off our last episode with Sean Divney and rolling into episode 3 this week with I think hands down one of the most talented musicians I've come across, and extra special to us being a Penrith boy, Marcus Catanzaro. How are you, pal?
Hey, dudes. Are you blushing? You're blushing a little bit.
Mate, it's Penrith got up last night, and might have been a couple of whiskeys too much. It's not.
You're just feeling the Penrith vibe right now. You're feeling proud.
Yeah. Western Sydney's finest, mate. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you.
Now, I'll ask you both before we get started. One of you is a Chelsea fan and one of you is a Man United fan. And they both lost overnight. So there's like tears, or are we just early on and,
Well, I think it's all perspective. You can't win every game. I think it's bad for morale. So I think that it's really important that we just drop a couple here and there,
Yeah, right.
And make it look like we're a human team.
Perfect Chelsea.
To be clear that I'm the Chelsea
from a Chelsea supporter.
I've got nothing. I'm just absolutely gutted with the loss to Aston Villa, mate, to be honest.
Well, Fernandez he still can't find the ball, mate. So
yeah, it's still skyrocketing into orbit. I know. It was dreadful. I've got nothing.
Now, Marcus, where do we catch you in this wonderful COVID time? Where are you today, mate?
I'm in Florida. I just arrived to Florida this morning from Tennessee last night.
Yeah, right. So we'll get stuck into, I guess, where you're at and what tour you're on. But today's show is brought to you by Mate. Choose a provider you can trust like a mate. Visit letsbemates.com.au. And we can't thank all our sponsors, but especially Mate enough. They give us the studio when we're allowed back in from COVID. So, and Youngen, when we can get back in, I guess it's COVID time, so we'll deal with what we got, but we can't wait to get back in studio.
Yep, absolutely, mate.
Now, Marcus, take us to where you were when Italy won the Euros, and it's coming to Rome.
Actually, I got quite a funny story because I hadn't been home in a little while. So my wife and I was finally home and we went to Disneyland, which is somewhere we go quite often. We live not far away from there. And I was actually sitting in a restaurant at Disneyland watching the final with one AirPod in. And my wife would kind of clutch my arm when I was getting too loud. And then eventually I looked, because obviously in America, no one's overly into football, into soccer. And I looked across the room and there's one other guy anxiously staring at his phone. And I went over and I was like, I did the whole point. Are you watching? And he was like, yep. And so we sat together and I watched the Euros with a random Italian dude at Disneyland. It was quite funny.
That's mad.
What a story.
Yeah.
Yeah,
good win. Good win as well, mate.
Great win. We really are just talking about sport so far. 10 minutes in.
Yeah, so we were giving it to each other but off air just before about all this. But, mate, the reason Youngen and I started this show was obviously the music industry's been affected by COVID, not just here in Australia, but worldwide. And obviously that's your full-time job. So can you give us a little bit of insight into how bad COVID has affected not only yourself, but the music industry in general?
Yeah, it's affected everybody. Everyone in the world in different ways, obviously. It's affected our industry hugely because we rely on people and shows. Like back in the day, if you went 40 years back, bands and artists made money off records and releasing music. But then with the kind of onslaught of all these digital music platforms, that flipped into touring and merchandise being the main kind of money makers. So that's a huge blow to anyone who's in a band or any artist that I work for or that's touring. And then obviously subsequently it's flowing down, to crew members, to merch companies, to touring companies, to bus companies, to caterers, to security, to venues. The flow-on effect is astronomical. And right now, like especially in Australia, like all my colleagues in the industry are trying to make that really known. The government seems to be missing the point. If you ask or if you read, any of the press statements, they make it sound like there's 100 people that aren't doing their hobby and touring Australia. It's like we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people that have been out of work for nearly 2 years. Like there is no working from home and there is no, side hustle. It's like this is what we do for a living. So it's a huge blow. Personally, I've been actually quite lucky. I've jumped between Australia and the US throughout COVID and the lockdowns, and I had studio work going on for a little bit of it. So I've actually not been affected to the degree that most of my colleagues have been, thankfully.
And we're noticing that in Australia, and obviously, I guess there's only sport on here, yeah. So sport's allowed in a big arena. Sport, they're allowed to do whatever they want, but we still can't get a festival on, or we still can't get anything like that, And I guess you saw the AFL Grand Final last night in WA, and it looked really good again. Live music back in a stadium and in a full stadium, I guess. So, like, it can happen, yeah?
It definitely can happen. There's a huge double-edged sword, that's striking its way through Australia. Like this double standard of sporting events happening. There are conferences that have happened. There's all sorts of things that have gone ahead with the same capacities that music has. So I don't really understand why Australian music and the Australian government can't get it together. I don't have an answer for you. I really don't.
Yeah, and it's a hard answer, Youngen. We've been trying to find it.
It doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense in my mind, where you've got sporting events with, everyone like bloody chanting and screaming, and it's everywhere. But you can't have a gig with, and it's like limited capacity, if anything, at best, only outdoors, which is coming up maybe soon. But sporting events is fully outdoors with hundreds of, what was last night at the AFL Grand Final? Maybe 80,000. 70,000. Like, and you're right, Marcus. Like, there's so many of us that have, it's their only income. And I don't even think there's, I still don't know if there's government support, like maybe the $750 a week or something, but.
The Australian government's been significantly better than most governments around the world for the arts. It's not a complete dissing of the government. They were really, really quick to mobilize some form of payments, but it's not really industry specific. And I think that's the quarrel that everybody has with it. It's small business specific, which most musicians, music companies, music businesses, we fall into those categories. So there's definitely benefits there that we have access to, which is amazing, but it's not specific to the music industry whatsoever. And like, you guys probably saw like a thing on Instagram. It's like when there are bushfires, musicians come together and we do relief concerts. When there are floods, when there is huge, events throughout history, it's generally music that brings people together to fundraise. And now it's our industry that is completely in disarray. We're talking huge financial trouble. There's already been venues shut down. There's companies not touring anymore. There are bands, there are crew members that won't come back. There's no mention of it. It's insane.
And I think that's to me. I think that's the issue. The non-mentioning of it all. And you're absolutely right. Live Aid, all those sort of things. Music people get behind, yeah. But now the effects it's had on the music industry seems to be just brushed under the carpet a little bit. And I guess what we're trying to do, and look, we are just a little potty, but like we're trying to just get people on our show to be able to talk about it and just get it out there. It's a talking point, yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to be a big podcast. Like, it's as simple as like, I think reminding people that, like right now you can go online and you could buy a Cambridge t-shirt, and that's money that Scott's band don't make right now. Like they can't sell them at gigs and they can't go touring. And so, if you have a favorite band, just buy a record, buy a t-shirt. Like it's literally the only way. Playing them on Spotify, like if you really get down to the numbers, it's something like 0.0015 cents per play. Yeah. Like you're not feeding anyone's families,
Yeah.
So
right.
it's just not enough, unfortunately. Like, you really have to go do something right now, otherwise your favorite band doesn't exist when COVID's over.
Yeah, and Youngen, you know about that.
Yeah, it's hard, you know, especially like for my band, Marcus, like, you know what we're all about. We've been slogging it out for years.
Drinking.
Yes, drinking.
I don't know what it's all about.
yeah, you're right there. I'm not going to sugarcoat that, but you know, like we got to a good point last year. We wrote a good song and we got noticed by our label Teamwork, and finally, you know, get signed. That's probably the probably the biggest thing that a band drives for, to get recognised. But yeah, like, you know, we get to that point and then COVID hit and now we can't do any shows. It's literally like
back to square one.
Yeah, you know, we write a song, release it. Okay, great. Can't play it. Just hope people like it, you know. And like, we do it for the love of course. Like, we love writing, but you know, it's playing, it's performing, you know, it's seeing people happy. Like, it's what drives us to continue doing what we do. Like, I mean, Marcus, you've made a life out of it, man. You know, it's
and I think like you touched on a good point. Is like, you know, you can release a record and hope people like it. Like, I think if you're not involved in the music industry, you don't realize like how intertwined all that is. Like, you know, you release a record and you have dates to support that record. So you go out on tour, people hear that song live, and maybe someone that didn't like the record or hadn't heard the record goes and buys the record, or maybe someone who randomly has never even heard the band and was at a gig buys a t-shirt and then buys the record, or they hear the record and they go to a show or whatever. It's all this layering of how we all kind of make money and how we exist. And honestly, without one piece of that, it doesn't exist. Like, it's a really convoluted situation.
And it's also the fact, I know, Scott, you're talking about that, how you couldn't support your song and the record and whatever else, but it's the three other bands that might be on that show as well, yeah? You also get their followers, like they've bought a ticket to watch their band, hang around, see you, you know, then they might jump on the back of that, or yours, like your people who follow you then jump on the back of those other bands as well, which isn't happening.
No, it's not. It's all about supporting one another. You know, Sean actually touched from Short Stack last week, was saying how he preferred to be the supporting band to the bigger bands, you know, just by his reasoning was that he liked to just get it over and done with it, get on the drink and watch the big guys do their thing. But I mean, like when we play, we have like you know, younger bands coming through that aren't, you know, recognized or anything like that. But you know, you see how happy they are to be there playing with us. And likewise for me, when, you know, we supported Newfound Glory or Mayday Parade and stuff like that, I'm there just going, oh my God, this is the best. But I think everyone helps everyone with that, you know. So I mean, I was playing with Newfound, they're there side of stage watching me do my thing, you know. It's like, it's a humbling feeling, but it's just that, like you said before, Marcus, where it's the coming together of music, you know, and it's what we do, and having it taken away, and it's really hard. It really is. It sucks. It does.
Yeah, it's brutal.
Yeah,
it's brutal. And you know, like if you had some kind of timeline or some kind of plan, then, you know, sure, you'd be like, okay, cool, this is what we're doing. You know, when COVID first started, a lot of my colleagues were like, well, and myself included, I did probably the first 6 months of the US lockdown with absolutely nothing. And kind of because I was like, you know what, it ended up being the longest I've been in one city since I was about 15. So for me, it was like, well, this is kind of cool. Like, I spent so much time with my partner, and, you know, I had so much time to just relax and, you know, treat it like a holiday. But then you get to like month 7, month 8, month 9, and you're like, holy shit, this is actually happening. And as I said, I'm lucky enough that I had things going on and I could pivot into them. But so many people are still, you know, in that first 6 month stage 19 months later.
Yeah, so we'll get on to how COVID has now sort of filtered out in the US and how you're back touring. But take us back to Western Sydney, Marcus, and how it all started for you, and how you sort of got into music, and now you're obviously worldwide.
Yeah. Well, obviously we all grew up in Penrith, which just happens to be when we grew up, like just a little hub for music. Pre-internet, it tended to create these little pockets in the world, obviously, but in Australia especially. You had Manly was a strong one, and then you had Castle Hill, and you had Penrith, and we all had our little haunts. And my older brother and sister Joey and Michelle both played in bands and were involved in music. So pretty much from the age of 11 or 12, I would kind of go play football on the weekend and then go watch my brother play a gig with my mum. So it always just seemed logical to me that that's what I would do. And then I grew up. I went to primary school with Dan Sipple, who I ended up playing in a band with, who you guys know, and some guys we all went to high school with. We all just happened to kind of meet and start a band when we were 13. And it's the beginning of what it feels like a hell of a story.
It is a hell of a story.
Yeah,
it is. That first band, All in Favour, I remember it like it was yesterday. I think you guys played it like was it Grounded? With like $1 Short, Sunk Lotto,
Area 7,
fucking hell, man.
Hardy.
Yeah, wow.
Classics.
Yeah, all just behind the old Museum of Fire there. So
that's right.
Unreal. You boys are great.
We were just lucky, to grow up in that area when music just, happened to be kind of taking. I started a music venue. I'd always kind of run shows at community centers and stuff from a very young age, and I'd make posters on clip art and book bands like Scott's and stuff like that. And then I started a proper music venue, and through that, I kind of had met a bunch of booking agents and managers and stuff like that. It ended up being the largest all ages venue in Australia. So we were, made more money when I was 15 than I probably did until I was 30. I just had wads of cash. Parkway Drive would come play the venue, and I'd walk away with a backpack of cash. Like, I didn't, know what the hell I was doing. And so I guess that's where it started. I toured my brother's band a whole bunch, and I always just wanted to be on tour and make this my life. So I worked for a bunch of Australian bands, $1 Short and Irrelevant, Something with Numbers, and took any job they would give me and toured for free for quite a while. If they made a bit of money on merch or something at the end of the tour, they'd give me $500. It's a school of hard knocks, though. It's funny because last night I was just talking to a colleague of mine who's significantly older. He's probably in his 60s. He was kind of doing that, that thing old people do when they're like, kids these days don't, talking about how a lot of young people my age who work in touring just don't have the work ethic that, they did in the 70s. And he was like, but funnily enough, like you strike me as more someone who's kind of taught, who's my age, And I was like, well, I think because I grew up in punk music, it's like, man, if you get a meal, you should be stoked, because we didn't. We slept on floors, and not to sound like an old guy, but we did. We've all done those Tarago tours, and we drove. We'd play a show Sunday afternoon in Adelaide, and then get in the car and hot tail at home to be at work on Monday morning. Through the night. We used to do like the old Tarago driving down the highway, and you wouldn't want to stop the bands. We'd change drivers while the band was still rolling, so you didn't lose time. Like wild shit like that, like we did all that stuff.
And I guess it makes you who you are too today, like you can appreciate what you've got now, and you can sort of see ahead as well.
Yeah, well, he's right, because I've worked on these like huge arena tours. I've worked with people my age who, say, if you work for an audio company or a video company, there's a really good chance you could just get a job with one of those companies and kind of be thrusted into that level of touring, as opposed to rising up the ranks. And like they can't believe the stories of like what it's like to tour in shitty venues and bands. Like they just can't comprehend it. They've always had buses and trucks and hotel rooms and private jets or whatever,
And
crazy.
We did actually.
And that's the funnest part.
We did see you. Were you watching some Champions League football the other day in a touring bus?
I was. That's all I do.
So it's from the Tarago to a touring bus, yeah? Is that where we're at now?
Yeah, and it's funny because I'll still complain, you know. But yeah, I've probably spent more of my adult life living in a bus than a house. That's for sure.
Yeah, right. We'll touch on that, I guess, later on. So give us, obviously, growing up Western Sydney, all those what we just spoke about. You know, you did all the hard work and whatever else, and then you obviously got to where you got to with hard work and whatever else. How does touring affect you now? Like, it's obviously, you just said you spent most of your adult life in a bus. Is it hard work sometimes? As much as it's enjoyable, I guess.
Yeah, it's super brutal. It depends, you know, like you could be on the cushiest tour, like, you know, the Fleetwood Mac tour was super comfortable, absolute pinnacle of touring as far as budgets and luxury and, you know, how you were treated as a person. But then you could be on a smaller tour, like, and we all go between artists. So, you know, you could be at a different stage of an artist's journey where it is brutal. You're working, you know, 22-hour days and then you're overnighting on a plane and you're getting off. Like, you know, even on this tour I'm on now, we're on a bus tour. Like, we finish work at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. We get on the bus, we go to sleep on the bus, and then we wake up outside a venue at 10 a.m. and we go to work, you know, and you do 3 in a row. So, you know, you guys, like, working a regular job, like you might be doing 6 to 6 is a bad day. You know, we're doing 14-hour days and then not going home. Literally no showers. You know, it's pretty brutal.
Wow. It's actually like hard to comprehend. You know, I'm now a husband and a father of 3. Marcus, you're married to a beautiful wife. You know, how do you go? Just going away like so long and doing it hard, and you know, obviously
key to a happy marriage. No, I'm lucky that Shawnee, my wife, is she's equally as busy as I am, and crushing her career, and she's just really realistic about it, you know, because there are pros to it. Like, I do think it is healthy to not be in each other's face. You know, like, think about when you have a shitty day at work, you come home and there's only one place for that, like, that vibe or that anger to go, and that's probably directed at your family. But whether you like it or not, you know, that's just how humans work. Whereas, like, I don't have that. Like, I call her and I can vent and we discuss my day and stuff. But then, like, it's just me, you know, and all that kind of stuff gets left at work. So then when I am home, I'm home for 6 weeks or 12 weeks or however long it is, and I'm just home. There is no, you know, stresses of work, whatever. So I cook and I clean. You know, I do way more than most partners would do. So there's pros and cons. Luckily, she's okay with it.
Yeah, you've done well, mate. You have done well there.
Yeah, very, very thankful.
Good on you, mate. That's awesome.
So, mate, can you take us to working on X Factor and how all that come about? And obviously there were some big tours off the back of that with the winners and whatever else.
Yeah. It's, you know, it's so funny because you could ask any question. It pretty much always makes its way back to, like, Penrith and music and running a venue. But yes, the X Factor, basically, all those TV shows used to always use this one core group of session musicians that were from the conservatorium. Like, they were the shit. They are the shit. They're the most incredible players, you know. But when the X Factor launched, they launched the first year with those guys, and they felt that it was not identifiable enough. It was too much like every other TV show, and they wanted to put a band on stage, and they wanted to make it, you know, feel like a rock concert. So the music director, Andrew Furs, who grew up in a similar kind of type of Penrith scenario, but in Victoria, he was like, well, let me find a bunch of indie musicians, you know, who would be absolutely thrilled to be on stage and know how to perform and know how to, you know, make this feel like a real show. Like, they don't know any better. They only know live music. Yeah. So we put a kind of crew of us together, myself and Dave Jenkins and Mike Jeffrey and Lachlan West and a bunch of, like, people who tour in really huge Australian bands now. And we became the X Factor house band.
And were you working with, well, when you had the Echo Creative, was that established at the time when X Factor approached you?
No, I'd actually my business partner Dave, I met on day one of X Factor. He was from the Central Coast music scene, kind of like the, I guess the generation after the $1 Shorts and after the Falls and stuff. So we randomly had never crossed paths.
Wow.
And I guess he's more of a creative, where I guess I'm a bit more business minded. We just saw a massive gap in the market where Sony Music didn't really know what to do with these artists. You know, they were a record label that all of a sudden had this kid, or, you know, this performer who'd basically never toured, but there was all this touring on the table. So Dave and I created a creative company we kind of came in as music directors, and as you know, Scott, and we put together bands and tours, and, you know, I guess in some way legitimized what they were trying to do.
Yeah.
And
well, that
yeah, go Scott.
Oh no, I was just going to touch on. You mentioned Dave Jenkins, session drummer, bloody really talented musician. We Heto as Cambridge, we actually worked with Marcus and Dave Jenkins and Reese Maston back in I think it was 2014. And yeah, I got a good insight to see how Dave and yourself, Marcus, worked. Incredible. You know, we actually wrote a song with you guys and Reese, which was really good. Yeah,
it's a good tune.
Great, awesome studio that you had there in, I think, Woolloomooloo, or yeah.
Well, the back of Alexandria.
Yeah.
Look, man, we would just, as I still am now, and you guys probably are, would just faking it until we make it, right? Like, you know, Dave's an incredible creative dude who can play everything. He's an incredible engineer. And I think I had experience in tour management and music direction and those kind of other aspects. So together we definitely offered enough to make it worthy for Sony Music to come on board as like a major client. And then that obviously started expanding out to indie bands. And so we decided to build a studio, and we just wanted to have some form of like a home base, I guess, for, you know, musicians and creatives. We felt like, again, I told you every story and every question will come back to Penrith, but we both likened it to Penrith and the Central Coast. We were like, when we grew up, you know, we'd go to the PCYC and everyone would be there, and 10 bands would be there, and there was this sense of community. And when we got thrown into this like TV major label music world, it was just really cold. It was really dark and really like, it was always about money, and it was always like everyone was trying to cut each other at the knees to get this work. And Dave and I were like, well, if we just created this company, we could supply everything they need through our friends, because we have a friend that does everything, you know. And then we would have this little community again, where instead of it's like, you know, being, don't hire Scott as a drummer because I'm better, it's like, yeah, you should definitely hire Scott as a drummer. And then Scott would be like, well, you should hire Marcus as a drummer, or Dave as a drummer. And all of a sudden it's like this, you know, we lift each other up thing. And I truly believe in that theory, like, you know, across every aspect of my life. You know, if someone's covering me on a gig, I always prep them and give them insane amounts of notes and make sure that they have the ability to do their best, because I think that makes you look better, as opposed to, you know, trying to set someone up. So
yeah.
And with the Echo Creative, there obviously become an issue with developers. Was it developers that got stuck in and wanted to knock it down? Is that what happened?
They did knock it down. Yeah, we just basically rocked up to work one day and we had a letter on the door saying we had 3 weeks to get out.
Far out.
Yeah, and because we were subleasing off another company, so the other company probably, it was a kitchen manufacturing, like a joinery company. They probably had 6 months notice and they got a huge buyout. But because we were on this strange sublease, we got nothing. And, you know, we'd spent $80,000 on this property to build a studio that we, you know, had only, actually at that point, I don't think we'd recouped entirely. You know, it was never a money making scheme. It was always you know, something to benefit all of us, more of a community thing. In fact, it was funded significantly by people in our industry, by peers. So it was a devastating blow. So I fought it, you know, in the stubborn Italian guy that I am. I fought it pretty hard all the way to council and to state government. And I don't want to say did nothing. You know, we did end up getting a little bit of government assistance, and we did raise a lot of awareness, and we did get them to write in a thing that they would promise more art spaces, and so it helped. But ultimately, Sydney turned into what Sydney is now. That whole kind of Waterloo area is insane.
Just units everywhere.
Yeah, needs more units.
Yeah.
So, but back on X Factor, how, obviously you were on touring with the winners. Did you realize how big X Factor was back then? Everyone was watching it, and Reece Maston, Samantha Jade, and all that. And Scott just said he went on a tour with Reece Maston. Did you realize the swell of support behind the show itself?
I guess so, and I guess not at the same time. It was huge for us, we were all of a sudden working on TV. I could never have comprehended that a few years prior. And we were such small cogs in that show's system. There were huge producers and music directors. It's owned by Fremantle Media, and people that knew way more than us. So we were kind of just there to do our part. But I guess once we started touring, we realized more and more how big it was. That first Reece Maston tour was bought out by a promoter, by a touring company.
Right.
So we didn't have a lot to do with it. We were kind of just the hired guns, and we went out on it. We were like, holy shit, there is, everywhere we go, we have, without exaggerating, we have 2,000 people waiting for us, everywhere we went for 3 years. And I'm just a hired gun, so it was so strange for us to be nothing to do with it, but because we were by default part of Reece's band, it became this total Beatle fever thing where, we couldn't go anywhere. It was crazy.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, so while we're there, I want to take you to Albury Wodonga. Was that the same tour, Albury Wodonga? I guess you probably, you met Scott down there and Cambridge, and take it from there if you can.
No, I can't. I actually can't. I don't often drink on tour. I've always been a tour manager, even when I played in bands and stuff. I've always been the inverted commas responsible one. So I actually don't often. I don't have a lot of these battle stories like these Cambridge fellas do. But I do remember that one night, as we discussed off air, Scott even remembers me saying I don't do this very often, and that's probably the last thing I remember.
Scott, can you pick it up? Youngen, can you pick it up for us?
It was a regional tour we were on with Reece Maston and Marcus, and that we hit Wagga, Griffith,
Wagga, Dubbo,
Albury.
Griffith,
yeah, and
all of the hit towns.
yeah. But
time goes backwards.
Mate, it does. It's kind of like
Dapto.
Dapto's just 2003 SMP fucking skate belts. But Albury Wodonga was the night Marcus thoroughly enjoyed himself a little too much, and
what was I doing? I genuinely can't remember.
I swear you were
being in a bar.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. You were it was like that outdoor area, and you were just fucking stood smirking at a bar for hours on end. I'm like, hey bro, you're like, hey man. I'm like, you're right. You're like, yeah. I'm like, do you want another drink? You're like, yeah. I'm like, all right. Yeah, no, you were you weren't a dick or anything like that, but you were very merry.
Just a fool.
Very merry.
It's funny because out of my entire nearly 20-year career in music, or what is a career, I guess, there isn't a lot of those nights in memory, and maybe there's 6 or 7 times where I'm like, oh, that was an insanely large night, and 3 of them are in Albury Wodonga.
Fucking hell, the country will do that to you. Wow.
I think I always just think this sounds real obnoxious, but I always think when we go to places like Albury, I'm like, I'm fucking invincible. What are they going to do in Albury? Everyone's so happy in Albury that you're out of towners, and everyone just wants to party. It's like your story in Canberra, You go to Belconnen. Man, what are they going to do? You're kings of Belconnen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You go to those places and it's it just seems to naturally become one of the big nights.
Yeah, I'm with you. If Albury's anything like Belconnen, I'm with you. It's just, you just enter it and you forget what you're actually doing.
Dude, totally. It's a bubble.
So since X Factor, since X Factor, you're obviously, you're overseas and touring with some massive bands. But the DMA'S, you've been doing a bit of work with the DMA'S. Is that right?
Yeah, I did them from, like the first year of their existence all the way through until about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So I went through, with those guys, I went from everything from, we were touring Europe over and over doing 150 cap rooms. Like I mentioned to you guys, you go from like really good touring to really bad touring, condition wise, because you're building a band. And, like DMA'S are one of those bands where the first time I saw them in a rehearsal room in Sydney, I was like, holy shit, these dudes are incredible. And I really do and did believe in DMA'S as a band. The proof is that they're one of the biggest bands in Europe right now.
Yeah.
We progressively, we went, we were going to Europe like 8-9 times a year, like insane amounts of flying, and we would just tour and tour and tour, and there'd be, 12 of us living in a bus. And we would just go to the Albury Wodongas of the UK, like the middle of nowhere, where like, instead of bogans, you have a bunch of chavs because they just love, like, eat up DMA'S. So we're going to places that were, very heavy kind of gang areas where there are generally like two, soccer firm type gangs. Places I didn't even know existed, I guess. And DMA'S would go in there and just bring this entire town together, and it would just be like, tour managing that band was insane. Like, you guys think you have stories, man, those dudes are wild. They're the last rock and rollers. I tell everybody they're the last rock and rollers.
Wow. They because like you're right, Marcus, that even the way their image, they look straight out of fucking like Birmingham or something. Like, like the hats with the collars popped and like coming from a West Ham game ready to stomp someone. I don't know.
Well, they're massive Evertonians.
Oh, right.
Are
they?
Yeah. They are,
wow.
yeah. They're actually the Everton uses one of their songs as their club song now.
Oh, wow!
And they're like honorary members. They've got like a locker at the Everton Stadium and stuff. Tommy, the singer, is born and bred Evertonian.
And does that? And I guess your career, you just said over 20 years. Is that the sort of thing that makes you happy that you were there from the start and where they are now?
Yeah, I think that like. That's what you do it for, like it sounds really really lame, but like it's cool doing arena tours and working for huge bands. I get such a kick, that initial email or phone call. It's like, hey, I'm from so and so and I'd love to offer you a position, and that is a huge adrenaline rush. But like looking back at my career, it's like watching Gang of Youths go from 200 cap to headlining Splinter in the Grass. Like what an insane moment. Or DMA'S, playing Glastonbury, or any of those kinds of things are just so cool. Yeah, and being there from that kind of beginning.
It'll just be mind blowing. Like, you're living a very good life, mate. To see artists from the start to like what you've just said, man. Like headlining like massive worldwide festivals that everyone knows about. Like. This
Funny thing is, so many people, like, I always get the question. It's such a classic question of like, don't you, you're a guitar player, don't you wish you're in the band, or wish you're on stage, or wish that your band was huge? And like, I really don't. I genuinely don't. Like, because like, if my band gets big, I get to go through that one time, that feeling of starting from nothing and getting huge. I go through this like. Twice, 3 times every 5 years with bands, like often, so like this adrenaline, this incredible feeling. And I have, with most bands, I have some form of input, whether it be from a business aspect or just making sure they don't die, or a creative aspect, like I have a stake in it. We all do, all crew members and tour managers and sound engineers. Like if you go listen to your favorite band and they weren't your favorite band at the time, and I don't know if you guys have seen a band, you walked away and you're like, that was the best gig I've ever been to. I'm obsessed with these guys. Like, the band's good, totally. But what you heard was the sound engineer and, the production tech who built the PA, and the guitar tech who, like, maybe pulled those guitar tones. Like, Mason from DMA'S, like, he used a very different type of guitar rig. And then when I started teching for him, I was like, you should really try this and this. And we developed this system that, like, arguably for me, when you go listen to DMA'S play a huge room, you hear this guitar, like hit you in the face, and like I helped create that, and that's such a fucking cool feeling. Like, it's unbelievable.
So can you take us there then? Can you take us there? And you mentioned guitar teching. So give us the insight into exactly what that entails on tour, being the guitar tech. You've just obviously explained a bit of the DMA'S there, but can you give the viewers, I guess, a bit of an insight into what you've just said again?
Well, it depends. Again, it's a moving target. If you work for a band like DMA'S or Gang of Youths, you might be taking care of 3, 4, 5 members of the band. You're responsible for everything from setting up the gear to the show itself, all the tunings, all the restringings, all the guitar changes, and packing up the gear, putting it on a truck, right? It might be kind of black and white. Then as you get kind of further on and you start working for a band, but you only take care of one artist. So like say on Fleetwood Mac, I only worked for Neil Finn. I have, from 9 in the morning until 1 in the morning the next day, all that time at work is just for Neil Finn. So that entails so much more. With Fleetwood Mac, when we got the call up, Neil Finn joined Fleetwood Mac. And so for him, it was a new thing as well. So I was flown to LA and we spent nearly 6 weeks just listening to old Fleetwood Mac records and then going, okay, cool, this guitar sounds like this. Because, we're talking about a span of 40 years of technology and advancement in sound and whatever. So, and Neil's not a huge audio guy. Like, he doesn't want to sit down in front of a guitar amp and find a sound. So, I sat in a room with millions of dollars of vintage amps and guitars and picked up this guitar and this amp, and I was like, nope, that's not the sound. Let's put that back. Let's try this, and designing, like redesigning sounds from kind of yesteryear, I guess, to fit within a Fleetwood Mac show.
Wow.
That's
incredible.
So,
man.
It can be really detailed. We build all the rigs. Like it's pretty complex of like, how do you get 19 guitars into one show, into someone's hands quickly? We have, it's like, when you watch Formula One and they change tires, like you have that long to swap guitars and it's got to be flawless. So we design those systems. It's cool.
And no wonder you're working that many hours in a day then. Like it seems pretty intense. Yeah.
It is intense. Yeah. But it's no different to anyone's job, like it's intense because it's a lot of stuff, but you dial it in and you start getting comfortable with it. And the beginning of the tour, when you have a new system, it's confusing and convoluted, and then every show gets that little bit better until something breaks,
Mate, that's incredible. How is Neil Finn as a, I'm a big fan of Neil Finn. I have been for a very long time. For him to approach you whether it was him that approached you or not, but to be able to work with him, that's incredible, mate.
Yeah.
So, how is he as a guy?
By far, like, you're one of the best human beings I've ever met in my life. Him and his family have been so insanely generous with me. I wouldn't have met my wife if it wasn't for them giving me the opportunity to go to America. I would never have worked for Fleetwood Mac. So many things I can pinpoint down to them believing in me as much as, I believe in his career.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, incredible. I lived with them for 2 years when I first came to America, in a little pool house out the back of their house in LA.
Oh yeah. Wow.
Yeah, like
awesome.
just things like that, generosity, because they know that moving to LA can be difficult and it can eat you up. And so, they included me as part of their family, which they really didn't have to do. And that probably did make LA kind of somewhat livable for me, and I'm still there. So maybe that is to do with their generosity and kindness. So yeah, the whole Finn family are by far the most talented, awesome people I've ever worked for.
Yeah, how good. Mate. Now, before we go, I've got a couple of questions just before we go. Give us, and it's probably going to be hard because you've done it for 20 years, but have you got a favourite tour that you've been on, whether it's been a stadium tour or just a pub gig? Does one stand out for you? Or tours, then? Give us a couple if you can't nut it down.
I don't know, man. I toured, my very first kind of bigger tour was with Sonic Numbers and Kiss Chasey when I think I was 16. And that was a pretty eye-opening, mind-blowing tour. Basically it'd been like Penrith and a little bit of Sydney up until that point, all in favor of played shows at random places, around Australia. But then that was my first like start to finish tour, and it was insane. As a kid to be working for someone like Sonic with Numbers, which at the time were massive.
Yeah.
That was pretty great. I have some pretty fun stories. I definitely wasn't the sober kid that I am now throughout that. But just things like, hilarious stories of like, I remember once we were at a gig. Actually, I think I was with Irrelevant. Yeah, it was Irrelevant, the hardcore band. Yeah. And we were at the front, and I was 16. I think I'd lost my license. I lost my license like the week I got my license when I was a kid. Penrith. I was probably at McDonald's and High Street doing burnouts or something. But so I didn't have a license or anything, and Irrelevant had played this awesome show, and we had this big 12-seater van with a trailer. I'd never driven a trailer or anything, and they were like, "We're all drunk, but like we've got to go. Like you're driving, And I remember we were parked down. We were in Melbourne somewhere, and we parked down this laneway, and like I had to reverse a trailer for the first time in my life, like out with all these wasted dudes. I think it was Amity Affliction and Irrelevant in the van. It's just like, fuck me, So
no pressure.
It's just one of those memories that like sticks with me. I just remember Mick, the drummer, throwing the keys to me, going, "You're up." It's like, I don't even have a license. It's all those early tours. But isn't that funny? Like Scott, you can attest to this. Like as musicians, we spend our whole life going, we want to tour the world, we want to play stadiums, and like having done, I've done Wembley Stadium, I've done Madison Square Garden, like I've done all these things. Like generally, when I get asked that question, I talk about something about touring with punk bands in Australia.
Yeah.
Like there's a part of me that feels like required to say, we played 2 nights at Wembley Stadium with Fleetwood Mac, and that was mind blowing and super cool. But genuinely, all of your fun stories, like Scott, you too, like they've happened. Like, your story about Canberra or our story about being in Wodonga, like they are the stories you'll tell forever. They're not, we played Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Berlin in Germany. We woke up on a bus. We went inside a cold arena. We got back on the bus. Like there's nothing happened.
And that probably makes sense after what we've just spoken to you about how intense, I guess, Fleetwood Mac was, and you were there 24 hours a day just about. So the enjoyable part is probably when you are asleep.
It is, totally. And you look back at like the inverted commas shit touring, and you're like, man, that was so fucking fun.
Yeah.
So breaking down, like not having fuel, all that kind of stuff on the side. It's like they're the best moments, right?
Yeah, all the things that are like least expected that just happen. I can really resonate with you there, man. And you're right. Like we have stories of like hitting roos and shit, and they're the ones you come back to because it was fucking hilarious. And you're like, what do I do? Fuck, we don't have insurance. Fuck,
that's right. Yeah, all that ridiculous stuff.
Like how we had to drive the We the Kings bus back.
Yeah, that was.
I hear.
Yeah, we got stitched up there. I don't even remember the drive home. That's how bad that was. Yeah,
that's a pretty horrible drive, right? That Canberra to Sydney drive. It's I always say,
man.
I've said my whole life, you could drive to Perth, and yet Canberra to Sydney feels longer.
Yeah,
it's the longest short drive on Earth. I'm telling you, it's like a fucking portal. It's always because you're super hungover coming back from some shitty part of Canberra. Every minute feels like 7 days. And somehow that highway, it's just brutal.
The fucking Hume Highway, man, it needs to be just blown up.
Get rid of it.
Start again.
Get rid of it.
You don't, mate. Build a tunnel.
Now, man, just before we go, have you got plans to head back here when ScoMo or Gladys or whoever the hell is in charge at the time opens up the borders? Have you got plans to come back and I guess any sort of tours for 2022 in Australia?
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of going through this now. I'm obviously in America and we're touring again. I've had several tours that have kind of put me on hold and include dates in Australia, but it's really hard to say, We cancelled the Crowded House shows that were supposed to be there. I was supposed to be there pretty much right now, actually. Doing, we had 16 arena shows with Crowded House that we had to cancel, which broke their heart and cost a ton of money, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So they haven't been rescheduled officially yet. And There were ASAP Rocky shows that we couldn't do. I know that there's a bunch of Lindsey Buckingham stuff, but who knows? Like, we're trying to schedule a wedding right now, and it's the same thing. It's like,
yeah.
When are you guys going to be allowed to leave? I couldn't believe that I was lucky enough, because we toured New Zealand with Crowded House, and I quarantined the whole time while I was there, and was paid to be there. I managed to jump over to Australia during COVID and see Aiden and my family and spend time. I spent 3 or 4 months there, and actually worked while America was in the worst of its lockdown. Worked in Australia with G Flip, the little Triple J chick, and then left. And the week after, you guys went into lockdown and America opened up. So when I said, like, I've been quite lucky, I genuinely mean I just somehow like dodged it. Yeah. So except for the initial couple of months, I really haven't stopped touring, which is nuts.
Credit to you, mate. You it's not like you're a lazy fucker. You're a hard working bloke, and you've done well to like you said, dodge all that sort of stuff. But
man, I had to put a shirt on just to get on this podcast. I literally texted you. It's my first day off in like quite a while, and I'm like, fuck, is this filmed?
Yeah, I was like, shit, I hope he's all right. I'm like, no doubt he'd be nude. I'm like, just throw a shirt on, bro.
Xbox in bed. Legitimately.
Mate, before you go, how's your son Aiden going, mate? I saw you.
He's great. Yeah, he's crushing it.
Fuck, mate. He's grown, man. Jesus.
He's massive.
He's fucking
so
tall as.
The thing about kids is they grow. It's so weird.
Yeah, you're right.
You guys have kids. You know what it's like. I'm a little bit more progressed because I got in there at age 16. But Penrith. But yeah, he's crushing it. He's really into guitar. And actually, funny, like, full circle story is that I never have pushed guitar on Aiden at all. He's been on tour with us his whole life, and he's always come, around music and stuff. And so he's kind of finally got the bug to start playing in bands and stuff. And his guitar teacher is actually Trent, the guitarist from $1 Short.
Oh,
so
wow.
It's really full circle, because
Really?
that's someone, when I was 16-year-old, like, that's who I worked for, and that was like my peer and my, a huge role model. And so for now, like, for him to be at home teaching my son while I'm on tour,
that's
so
awesome.
sick.
That's awesome.
Yeah, good.
You'd be fucking stoked with that, no doubt.
Yeah, and Aiden, obviously, Trent's an incredible dude and incredible guitar player. So Aiden's
man.
Pumped, and he's doing great. I think he's probably pretty over lockdown, but the new FIFA comes out in a week, so I think he's probably sorted for 12 weeks.
Mate, and I'll reiterate what Scott said, mate. You've 20 years in, obviously, the music industry, and you've worked from, for nothing to what you're doing now, mate. So thank you for coming on, and obviously, man, massive congratulations on where you're at, and hopefully when you get back to Australia, we can catch up and get in studio and do a real proper chat live.
Yeah, thanks, dude. It's been a pretty wild road. Who knows how the fuck I got here, but here I am. Thanks for being legends and keeping it real.
Good on you, man. So, Young, and this show can't obviously happen without our good sponsors. So, mate, choose a provider you can trust like a mate. Visit letsbemates.com.au. MG Active, who are doing Zoom classes for the gym. Look how fit I'm looking. This shirt fits perfectly.
Good.
So,
It's bulging.
I'm staying in shape. Monster Clothing have just come on board. So the place to go for some great quality casual clothing based around some epic builds. So jump on their social media and grab some clothes where you can. Ignify Legal. It's always good to have a lawyer on board. So Ian and the team at Ignify Legal, when lockdown gets young, we might need him when lockdown's over. You never know.
I'm a bit worried, eh?
And the man behind this podcast, Jeff from Sensor Studios. Jeff, thank you for making us, I guess, look half decent again, and making sure we sound better than we actually sound. So, Jeff, Sensor Studios, go and follow Sensor Studios on social media, and we'll tag it all in. But Marcus, thanks for jumping on, my man.
Pleasure. Thanks, dude.
Thank you, Marcus.
Great
to catch up, mate. Good stuff.
Yeah, man. 2747 for life.
Cheers,
Cheers, mate.